Good morning and welcome to the Public Affairs Forum at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Our forum is free and open to the public and runs almost every Sunday at noon. You can check the website austinuu.org for more information. And this morning I would like to introduce Dale Beulah, who will be introducing today's speaker.
Thank you, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce a dear friend and fellow birder, Jane Tillman. She's going to be presenting our talk today on birds of Central Texas. She's an active member of the Audubon Society and a Capital Area Master Naturalist, as well as a National Wildlife Federation habitat steward, so she wears lots of hats. Jane was recognized by the 4 million member National Wildlife Federation in 2011. She was recognized as Volunteer of the Year for her work in training more than 100 habitat stewards to create backyard wildlife habitat right here in Austin. She is also active in the effort to certify Austin as a National Wildlife Federation community wildlife habitat, and that happened in 2009. She teaches beginning birding classes, leads field trips, and gives talks about Central Texas birds and gardening for birds in this area, especially to garden clubs, neighborhood associations, libraries, and the UT NOVA program, as well as the Bob Bullock Museum. So if you have a group that is interested, please check with her afterward and see if you can get on her calendar. She is an invited speaker also for September of this year at the Rockport Hummingbird Festival. And so she's here to share her knowledge with us today. She gardens for wildlife. She even had a rare green violet-eared hummingbird in her yard in 2008 and was written up in the Austin American Statesman. Very rare bird. If you would like to garden for wildlife, please check out our tables out in the foyer. There's lots of habitat forms there, as well as a plant book that can help you attract birds and wildlife, butterflies, hummingbirds into your backyard. So without any more delay, let me show you. Here's how you can get your yard certified as a habitat, and then your booklet for native plants to attract wildlife. So we'll talk with you later, but right now you want to hear Jane. Come on up, Jane.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction from a partner in crime. So today, I'm really going to talk about the joys of backyard birding. You don't have to drive very far in order to enjoy some of the wonderful birds in Central Texas. So I just have a question. How many birds do you think it's possible to see in Central Texas? How many numbers? How many species do you think? 100, 200, 200. Going once, going twice. Okay, it's about 430 species. Now, of those, in your backyard, if you start keeping a backyard list, you could probably get about 50 to 60. Okay, so that should be your goal. Okay, so by the end of this talk, I hope to inspire you to take one step, at least, to help our be here for posterity. And another goal is for you to be able to identify at least 5 of the common backyard birds. So one of the first things I want you to know, back out in the lobby, there is a handout that does list, I think, about the 20 most common birds that you might see, and that really helps if you're just sticking your foot into the water and trying to decide if you want to become a bird watcher, okay? So, why birds? People ask me this question. It's like, really? My goodness, they're wonderful. They inspire art, they inspire literature, poetry, dance. They really are a wonderful window to nature. And think about it, many of them do have the most gorgeous songs, if you just have ears to hear. But if you want to be a more practical sort, you can say, well, you know, birds are really nature's janitors in terms of our vultures and even our great-tailed grackles, which will scarf up any French fries that are left out. They also do a great job of dispersing seed, whether it's a good seed or a bad seed. The birds are not particularly particular. Our hummingbirds and our orioles do some kinds of pollination. They're not nearly as important as insects. The birds do produce uric acid waste, and that is a source of nitrogen. So actually, when you think about it, our birds that eat the berries and then they immediately poop about 10 minutes later, they are actually giving that little seed a chance on life because it's deposited in that uric acid, which gives it that initial boost to actually germinate and begin to sprout. Birds provide protection. They really do eat many, many insects that do chew on our crops, for example. And then when you think about our woodpeckers, they do a pretty darn good job of breaking down wood and turning it back into soil. So just a few practical things before we actually start looking at some birds is if you have your grandfather's antique binoculars, those are really nice, but it would really enhance your enjoyment of birds if you got a newer pair of binoculars. You can get them in the $200 to $300 range. You're looking for some really with the magnification of a 7 or an 8, and then with the objective lens, which is the big lens, of about 35 millimeter to 42 millimeters. So if you just go to Eagle Optics, it's a great website, you can actually find out lots and lots about binoculars. You really do want to try them out though, because people's eyes are closer together in some cases than others, so it does make a difference. You should be able to try them out, say go to a birding festival like Rockport Hummingbird Festival and try them there, or go to High Island during spring migration and they'll have people there who you can try them, you can take them outside and look. Field guides. How many of y'all have a golden guide from your childhood? Right, one. The Golden Guide is a fun little book, but we have gotten so much better at describing field marks, key parts of the bird that you can look at to actually figure out what that bird is. And so the newer field guides, the newest one is actually the National Geographic one on the screen. That is the latest, and all birders probably are going to get it into their arsenal. The middle one is really about the size of your hymnal here, and so it's pretty heavy, but it is the Sibley Guide, and he's an amazing artist. All of his are artists' drawings and paintings of the birds, and it's probably the most detailed in terms of helping you figure out what the bird is. And then if you're a beginner birder or even an intermediate birder, a lot of people like the Kaufman Guide because it's small and it can almost fit into a pocket. So it only shows adult birds, which is kind of problematic. Another thing to think about is, does that bird really occur in Central Texas? We are so fortunate to live in Texas. It is the second birdiest in the state after California. We have had so far 639 documented species, and of those, again, 430 in Central Texas over time, really in a good year, you're probably going to see maybe 300. So you want to narrow down which birds really are going to be here. Do we get purple finches? Do we get Cassin's finches? Not really, So checklists and field guides will help you with range maps. Does that bird show in the eastern U.S., the western U.S.? But I have to say, there's a wonderful citizen science project going on from Cornell Lab, which is the name in bird research in the U.S., Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they have an eBird site. So if you want to write that down and just go explore eBird data, you can actually enroll your house and start logging your sightings on eBird, and it will go into the database. There's a great backyard bird count that comes up the weekend of the President's Day weekend in February, about the 17th, and you can participate in that, and it really helps researchers get a good handle on how bird populations are changing and shifting with things like climate change. So, the next thing is to begin to train your eyes. There's a difference between looking and seeing. in all things. And it's just as true with bird watching. You can look at a bird and there it goes, you know. But if you know what to look for, then you really begin to see it. And the first thing that we might be struck with, besides color, is what size is that bird? So, you know, if you can mentally imagine a mockingbird, I just saw one outside, or a starling, or a house sparrow, you know, that's some context. And then if you saw a bird that was a little bigger than that, you know, okay, when I'm looking, it's going to be bigger than a house sparrow. So I can look up to see the length of a house sparrow and go from there. But look at these on on this slide. My little pointer is not showing up here. Oh, there we go. We have, it looks like we have two birds, or one bird almost. We have a little bitty chickadee that's only about 4.75 inches long. And on the other side, we have a red cardinal, which is about 8.75 inches long. And on the right, we have a blue jay, which is about 11 inches. So these birds are substantially different in size, and they're all definitely ones that will show up at your backyard, at your feeders. Like sunflower seed is one of the favorite things of many of our birds that come to our backyards. The bill matters. Have you ever wondered how you can have so many different birds in the same space and they're not directly competing with each other? Well, it's because they're eating different things, right? Some are eating seeds, some are eating insects, some are eating fruits. Some are going to even eat fish. If you have a koi pond, you're probably not too crazy about the great blue herons that come in. But for example, in this upper corner, we have the cardinal, and it's got a pretty substantial bill, right? I mean, it's a seed eater bill. So, and then in the middle of the top, we have a little calliope hummingbird. We don't get very many of those. We sometimes get them for the winter, but it's pretty exciting if everybody makes the obligatory trip to go see it when it shows up, like down at Zilker Botanical Gardens. They have one every now and then throughout the winter. Then, of course, it's a nectar eater. Although, did you know hummingbirds mainly eat insects? 60% of their diet is insects, so they do use that bill for that. Then we have things like our towhee, which comes to spend the winter. It's with that orange. I can't really do my pointer here because it's just going to advance the slide, I'm afraid. But over there we have the towhee, a sparrow-sized bird. It is a sparrow, and it eats seeds. Then we have even winter warblers that have a pretty narrow bill. They're pretty much insectivores. And then we have purple martins, which are aerial insectivores. So they just basically fly, and the insects fly into their gullet. And then we have those birds like fish eaters. The other thing you begin to look at is, oh, does that bird have a small head, like a dove? Does it have a big-headed look to it, like a kingfisher or maybe a blue jay? Does it have a crest? Like the blue jay does have a crest, but in this picture, it's not showing the crest, so he's actually in passive mode. If he were in active aggressive mode, that crest would come up. Do they have circles around the eye, which are called eye rings, usually not feathered, but it's usually white in a bird that has an eye ring, but not always? And does it have a line, like feathers through the eyes, from the front of the eye between the bill and the eye, and then from the eye on back? So like in this case, yes, this blue jay does have an eye line behind the eye, but not in front of the eye. You look for other action on the bird. Is there something going on with the throat? Are there streaks? What kind of tail does it have? Does it have a forked tail? Does it have a short tail? Does it have a pointy tail? Those are all things you begin to see. And the sad thing about birds is they don't stay still necessarily. And so, you may not get to see what's going on the back, but it's really important what's going on the nape, which is the back of the neck. What color is the rump? And what color is it underneath? So sometimes taking a picture is a really good idea, and send it to Travis Audubon and we'll try to ID it for you, and that'll get you started. Think about birds too, like what's going on in Austin right now. What bird is flocking into huge overnight roosts? Great-tailed grackles. Go to your local HEB tonight about 5:30, and there'll probably be like 4,000 grackles on the lines if there are electrical lines around there. So different birds have different behaviors. Some are flocking birds, some are more solitary. Then we also have posture. Some birds perch very upright, some birds perch very horizontally. So that's something to start paying attention to. And so we're just going to run through some very basic parts of the bird. Bills matter, right? So this is our cedar waxwing. They will start showing up, they start showing up now, but they're kind of out more in the hill country. And as it gets towards January, then they're going to come into town, and we'll see them and we'll hear big flocks. They're usually around 200 birds. And they come into yards and they eat a lot of berries, okay? So this bird eats a lot of berries, a lot of foliage, a lot of fruits. And then it has a crest, okay? You always want to look to see what's going on with the wing. This is a fairly plain wing, but it has a little bit of white in what we call the primaries. That's getting a little too deep though. What color is the breast? And does it have streaks on the breast or not? If it has streaks, do they go all the way down the breast or not? It gets over the top sometimes. The rump, which we can't really see here, but what color is it? And then what are the flanks? Are they streaked or not? So in this bird, no, they're not. They're kind of yellowish. And then the undertail coverts. That is really important when it comes time to identify warblers. And honestly, you gotta really wanna know it in order to see it. Okay, so here's your quiz. What do you see? Red, okay. Field guides are not organized by color, okay? They're just not. They're organized taxonomically by the bird's evolution, okay? So so we saw a crest on the cardinal, which is on the right. What else is different? Posture, but somebody said eyes. What about the eyes are different? Oh, okay, well, that may be a little bit misleading, but yeah, certainly the eye stands out more on this is a tanager, a summer tanager on the left. The beak is definitely just both the color of it and also the shape. So, do we get summer tanagers in Austin? Yes, we do. Okay, every bird I'm showing you is going to occur in Austin. I'm not going to be, talking about brown boobies, for example, which are a bird that occasionally do show up in Central Texas. I just had to say that one. It's kind of funny. But anyway, summer tanagers spend the winter in Mexico and Central America. They come to Austin, and they're really along our creeks with tall trees, in the tall trees during the summertime. They are bee and wasp specialists. So you will see them, and they'll actually go towards a wasp nest. They'll grab a wasp, they'll take it to a branch, go whack, 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 get rid of the stinger, and then gobble it up. But yes, posture, somebody said posture. They're kind of a horizontal perching bird, whereas the cardinals are perched pretty upright. And sometimes when you see cardinals singing, they actually sort of cant their tail a little bit like this. So here's the bird, and the tail goes like that. So those are some differences. The black mask is definitely different too. Now, another thing that confuses us with birds sometimes is the fact that the male and the female are different in some species and in the same in others. So here we have the male cardinal, and generally the male is going to be the really colorful bird of the species because he's got to attract a mate. And with cardinals, the brighter red they are, the more successful they're going to be, because that has to do with their diet. So Leslie here would be a very attractive cardinal. Then we have the female cardinals, and usually the young of a species look very similar to the female because the females have to sit on the nest, and their goal is to be inconspicuous to predators, so they are generally kind of drab. But yes, these are both the same species. Now, I don't know if I would be so attracted to birds if they all looked like this. What's going on here? It looks like this cardinal has the mange. Well, birds do molt their feathers usually a couple of times a year, sometimes just once in some species. But this guy just lost all his head feathers at once. So you do see some interesting things when you start to look at birds. So I said you had to train your eyes. You also want to tune your ears. And unfortunately, we're not very nice to our ears over our lives. And so some of us may have lost a little bit of our high-end hearing, high-pitched hearing. So if that's the case, you can actually find something like Song Finder from this guy, Lang Elliott, who does wonderful CDs. I highly recommend, because birds don't just sing one song. They will sing several. Like a Carolina wren sings about 40 different songs. So if you just hear a little snippet like you can get on a iPhone application, it's not as good as hearing the multiple different things that a Carolina wren has to say about life. So here are some just the iPhone apps, and I think on my handout I have these listed too. Then you also want to realize too that even in our landscapes, our home landscapes, birds are using different niches, and that's another way they can compete in the same environment. So even though birds do move throughout the canopy, you're more likely to see certain ones in certain parts. Like owls love to perch high on rooftops. Okay, robins like to be in the upper part of the canopy. That's where a lot of our warblers are. So if you've never seen a warbler, it's because you have not been looking up. And that was one of the first things I learned when I started birding, is like, oh my gosh, I really haven't been looking up too much. Mid-story is where we get our typical backyard residents, the jays, the chickadees. Understory, a lot of birds really like in that area between the ground and about 6 feet. So if we don't have any shrubs there for them, we're probably not going to get them in our yards. And then things like not just our house sparrows, which we're not really here to attract, but our native sparrows. They're usually ground feeders. And these are the ones that are most vulnerable to cats, okay, because they are down there where the cats can get them. And then you really want to scan the skies. And one of the best times to do that is when you're going to the grocery store and you've got that big parking lot. You can look up and you can see what's moving overhead. It's very fun and very eye-opening. I was at the Girl Scout headquarters yesterday, and that's where all the action was, because we didn't have much going on the ground or in the trees, but we had red-tailed hawk, sharp-shinned hawk, turkey vulture, black vulture, all soaring overhead. Pretty cool. So I'll go through a few slides of different birds that we may love or hate depending on whether we're trying to attract them to our yards. This one needs no attracting. If you've got sunflower seed or millet, it's going to come into your yard. But it's really a rather cautionary tale, because the white-winged dove back in the 30s its population had crashed from 12 million to about 500,000 birds. And because of hunting and habitat destruction in its native habitat, which was South Texas. So it started, there was a dove stamp that people bought to help conserve doves. And since then, the population has rebounded to about 2.2 million, and their range is expanding. There was a freeze in the valley in the 1980s, which knocked out the groves of citrus that they were nesting in, so they started their march northward. And now, how many of y'all have white-winged doves in your yard? Yeah, I mean, they're pretty successful, and I imagine, apparently they're advancing at about 20 kilometers per year across the country. And they're really doing a number on another native species, so both are native, the mourning dove. The mourning dove is susceptible to a parasite that the white-winged dove is a carrier for. And in the mourning dove, it actually does cause oral lesions, and many of the birds die. So we're not seeing it. I mean, it's still got good populations, but it's not doing quite as well as the white-winged dove. But how are these birds different? I forgot to say. So the white-winged dove, I mean, really, have you looked at it? It's really rather pretty. Small head, kind of chunky body, that definite light white wing, along the edge of the wing. and that nice kind of black sort of throat or malar stripe, whereas the mourning dove has just a dark eye and spots, and it's got a real pointy tail. So if you see a little bird sitting on the wire, it's got a small head, kind of lumpy, and a pointy tail, it's a mourning dove. But there are tons of white-winged doves. Like I saw a flock of 300 white-winged doves yesterday. Well, if it ever gets really quiet in your backyard and you go, wow, the birds were just here and now they are disappeared, it's because there's a Cooper's hawk or a sharp-shinned hawk on the prowl. These are wonderfully adapted birds that have long tails, kind of short wings, and they can zip through our trees and our brush that are densely, thick, like dense thickets. They can move through that, and they ambush small songbirds. This guy can actually take up to the size of a white-winged dove, because I saw him do it in my backyard one day. But that's what happens. We do have these kind of birds. And if a Cooper's hawk moves into your neighborhood, you might want to take your feeder down for a while, just because. Let him go shop somewhere else. And you're making it too easy for him. It's the dinner buffet is lined out before him. I think a day without a chickadee is like a day without sunshine. But Carolina chickadees, like many birds, can see ultraviolet. So you and I are just seeing this little bird with a black throat and kind of white cheek and a black head and kind of, tannish on his breast and flanks. But if I were a chickadee, I could tell that white was really bright, and there's some gray on the back that we can't see that's really bright, because they can actually tell the male from the female by the fluorescing of the feathers. It is oftentimes joined at feeders by the black-crested titmouse. We're interesting in Austin because we're on the crossroads between the east and the west. We got the Blackland Prairie on the east, and we got the Edwards Plateau, Balcones Canyonlands out here on the west side. And so we get birds that from both areas of the country. So we actually do get some hybridizing birds. But many of our birds, like in this area, are going to be black-crested titmice. They're a little bit bigger than chickadees. They dominate them at the feeder. It's kind of fun to watch these little seed eaters, because they'll come to your sunflower seed, which you can just get, HEB, black oil sunflower seed, is going to be the real crowd pleaser. They'll take that seed away and they'll hammer on it, hold it in their feet, and they'll hammer on it till they get the kernel out. Carolina wrens. Who's got Carolina wrens? All right. Carolina wrens are really known for doing little push-ups. They'll sing, they'll move around on your deck, and they'll do these cute little push-ups. They have a song that's a very rolling tea kettle rhythm to it. The female, if you've always wondered, well, what's making that little bzzzt sound? Bzzzt? The male sings, and the female, all she can do is bzzzt. So you'll hear that. You'll hear them. They'll be kind of duetting back and forth, or they'll be staying in contact as they're foraging. But if you're a little bit more west, or like I'm in Northwest Hills, I have Buick's wrens also. So they are a little bit drabber, a little bit browner, and a little bit grayer, as you can see on the sides of the bird. And they sound totally different. So I have not heard of any hybridizing between the two. Well, we've already looked at the blue jay, but the blue jay is responsible, so I've been told, for replanting the forests of North America after the last ice age about 10,000 years ago, because they do. You'll watch them. They'll get seeds and they'll go plant them because they're going to retrieve them later, but fortunately they don't retrieve every single one of them. So they do a good job with oaks, for example. Their babies do fledge from the ground. Sometimes people say, is it okay? I've got this baby bird. They take it into rehab. It was on the ground. Well, unfortunately, some birds do fledge from the ground, and so it makes them very vulnerable. So if you do see one that looks like it's fully feathered and doesn't have much of a tail, but it's out of the nest, chances are it's trying to learn to fly, because all birds have to learn to fly. And so you can just maybe put it up in a shrub, put your cat back inside, and know that mom and dad are close by keeping an eye on it. We do have woodpeckers that do move around with the titmice and the chickadees. This is downy. It's our smallest woodpecker in North America. It's very characterized by a descending call that it has, very high-pitched, and it descends. The males of many woodpeckers have some kind of red on the head, where the females do not. And then the downy is really known for the fact that it's got this white splotch down the middle, okay? And a very, very tiny bill. If y'all ever see a bird that looks like this is only about 6 inches long. But if you see one that's about 9 inches long and it's got a really long bill and it's got that white splotch on the back, would you call Travis Audubon? Because there are many people in town who want that bird. We keep lists, and we want that bird for Travis County because it's unusual to see it. You'll see it in Bastrop County, but you won't. It's a hairy. That's what we're talking about, hairy woodpecker. Okay, some of us have ladderback woodpeckers too. How is this different? You're not supposed to be napping. You're supposed to be paying attention. How is this bird different from downy? It's got a lot of speckles on the flanks and the breast. It's got that red all the way across the head like that, and the black on the face is different. It's actually called a reverse C. And if we could see it, this bird is zebra striped all the way across the back. Here's the female ladderback. Now it's interesting, I told you about how birds adapt. The male ladderback gets to forage on the big, thick branches and thick trunks of trees. If they remove the male from a territory, the females start moving into that. So the males are dominating the females in this regard. So the females are relegated to stalks of plants, like leftover frostweed, and they will also forage on thin branches. But move that male out and the female goes for the good stuff. So you notice she does not have any red on her hair. So here's your quiz. Which one's the downy and which one's the ladderback? Okay, the one on the left is the downy, right, okay. And it's a downy female because it doesn't have that red, so that's kind of the trick there. And then, of course, there's the male ladderbacked. And like in Jester, Northwest Hills, chances are you're going to have both downy and really all over Travis County, you can have both of these occurring in your yard. If you leave snags, snags are going to be more for these guys. Okay, is this a downy or ladderback? And look how its red only goes so far up. So that's actually a female red-bellied woodpecker. You can attract them to your yards. Woodpeckers love suet, and today is not a good example of a winter day, but tomorrow will be a little cooler. You can put suet out for them in the winter months. You can buy cakes of suet at H-E-B or Wild Birds Unlimited. And the woodpeckers will come to it, but they'll also come to sunflower feeders. And you can get feeders like this, cylinder feeders, that have a weight. So if a heavy bird or a squirrel lands on it, the ports will actually close. You can see those little sort of hook things to the right of its foot, and that'll close. And then the birds can't waste all that seed. Mockingbirds. Mockingbirds are doing pretty well in Texas, but we are seeing declines in other parts of the country. It is our state bird, along with, I think, 6 other states. I mean, we could have been a little more imaginative in choosing our state bird, but they love berries. So they're doing well in Texas because we plant a lot of berrying plants like yopon, beautyberry, possum haw. And does anybody have mockingbirds that show up in their neighborhood? Of course, they usually sing about 6 repetitions of a song, and then they switch. They can imitate most anything. They can imitate trucks backing up, the sound that they make, referees, whistles. But if they do it about 6 times and then they switch, you'll know that was not a referee or that was not a quail, that it was the silly mockingbird doing an imitation. Another bird we have commonly in Austin is the lesser goldfinch. They're kind of drab, but they're very chatty. The females are a little, kind of olivey green. But look at the male. He is pretty striking, and they are in their fresh fall plumage right now, and they are really standing out in the landscape. Now, they don't really go to the sunflower except during breeding season, they're one of the birds that breeds a little bit later, and they need that protein from the sunflower seed. But most, so like in May, June, but this time of the year, they'll come to your thistle or Niger seed, which is one you can get at a big box store. But you want to make sure it's fresh, or they will turn their little noses up at it, and you just wasted $16 or $18. So you want to make sure your thistle is fresh. This guy is actually on some rosemary. I live in a deer-infested neighborhood, and he's actually getting something delicious from the rosemary. You know, sometimes we think that caterpillars are doing all sorts of damage in our yards, but in fact, birds do eat foliage. And you can see all these little lesser goldfinches that were eating the plateau goldeneye leaves in my yard. It was kind of fun. They're just all over the place. And that's okay. The plant is actually adapted to these birds, and so it'll bounce back. It'll still bloom. But just keep that in mind, which is why we don't like to spray things for aphids or, you know, no pesticides, because these little birds are ingesting all of that. Has anybody heard a great horned owl recently? Okay, they started hooting in about October, and the males have the deeper voice, the females have a little bit higher pitch, but they are definitely thinking about it's time to make babies. So they will be on their nests in December, January, probably fledging their young in March. One of the best places to go look for them is at the Wildflower Center, because they've had successful nesting great horned owls the last, I think, 3 years. Their eyes are huge. If we had eyes the same as a great horned owls, they would be the size of softballs, as I have here. One of their mating rituals is, if you ever find a little bird in your yard that doesn't have its head, you think, what happened? Well, that is one of the things that the male brings to the female, as the head of a little songbird, because that's really where all the protein is, you know? So anyway, if you find a headless bird, it could be a sharp-shinned hawk, but it could be a great horned owl too. They are very, very neat birds. They'll nest even on the grounds. You know, one place, if you're wanting to hear them hoot, is to go down to Ladybird Lake by Redbud Isle, because they must be nesting on the cliffs down there. I hear them down there. All right, now here's a bird some of us love to hate. It was introduced back in the 1850s because people missed those birds from the old country. And so we have male house sparrows, which you can tell the dominance of house sparrows by how much black they have. And then this is what the female looks like. She's kind of drab, but these are good birds to learn, because you can turn them into just about any other sparrow or any other warbler if you don't pay attention to the fact that it's a granivorous sort of bill, you know, and it doesn't really have any wing bars. But I'll tell you, I can turn them into other things, and I bet you can too. It's like, oh, is that a Lincoln sparrow? No, it's not. Okay, so I'm just quickly going to talk about a few winter birds. Those lovely cedar waxwings. One day you might have all the berries on your yopon or your possum haw, and the next day they're gone. And that was because you had a flock of cedar waxwings that came in to decimate them. And that's okay. That's what it's meant for. What are our birds going to eat when we have an ice storm? So they like berries. This is one that I assure you, if you have any oak trees in your backyard, it's around. It's like a little flying ping pong ball, the ruby-crowned kinglet. And one thing, if you just see a little bird and it's moving and it's flitting and it's moving, if you go psh, 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 or tsk, 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 they love to come down. They're very curious, just like chickadees. And they'll come down. I had ones yesterday that were like maybe there, and I'm here. You know, it's just kind of neat to see them. And when they're curious like that, they'll show their little red crown, the males. Otherwise, the red crown is not really that visible. But it's got a little bit of a teardrop shape behind the eye, and it does have that one little wing bar, which kind of helps. And it's only about 4.5. It's a micro bird. It spends its summers in the Rocky Mountains all the way up into Canada. Our lesser goldfinches are going to be joined at your feeders by American goldfinches. They're a little bit larger than lessers. And the one on the right, that's about what they look like right now. A really strong wing bar, gorgeous buffy tones. If anybody's from the Northeast, the males turn in that bright yellow with just a little black on their heads in the summer. But we only see them in their winter plumage down here. Except as winter turns to spring, they might begin to change. Now here's one that does a transformation. These are all over town right now. Again, probably in oaks, cedar elms, yellow-rumped warblers. So we do have warblers that spend the winter with us, the yellow-rumped and the orange-crowned. And look, it really does have a yellow rump if you can see it. A lot of streaking on the sides and a little yellow on the sides too. But in April or so, you'll look maybe at your backyard bird bath and you go, oh my gosh, look, that's a different bird. Well, he's just molted into his alternate plumage, ready to go back north for the breeding season. Same bird. So isn't that interesting how birds can change their appearance from winter to spring? Then we get into spring migration. So from March 15th through about May 15th, that's when birders call in sick and they go AWOL. Anytime we have a front that passes through where you have a storm, that puts the birds down because they're coming across the Gulf. They barely get to the coast, and this cold front is stalling them out. And they literally fall out of the skies sometimes because they're just so exhausted after trying to make that trans-Gulf flight. So these are all ones that I've had in my backyard. And again, some people joke about getting warbler neck, and you do have to be careful with how you look up because they're going to be foraging around in the tops of your trees, but they're well worth it. I mean, these are eye candy, aren't they? Look at that. These are called neotropical migrants. Chimney swifts, fabulous birds. They are a declining species, 65% decline since 1966, which is when we really started tracking some of these neotropical migrants. So if you have a chimney with a clay flue tile and you don't mind having a little racket in your chimney from about April to late July, then you can actually have chimney swifts and help out the population. They are aerial insectivores like this bird and the purple martin are not doing well. We're seeing big declines in their numbers. What's it due to? Well, probably due to habitat loss, the preponderance of pesticides that we use that are reducing the number of insects, flying insects that they need. Those are two big reasons. So do y'all have a purple martin house here at First Unitarian Church? It would be something that would be really well received because you've got the right habitat for it. And I know this is not a backyard thing, but during July, we invite you to come out to Highland Mall, which is where there's a big purple martin roost every year. About 400,000 purple martins come in to roost at Highland Mall on the north side. It's well worth seeing. The Austin Chronicle said we were better than the bats this year. Then we get hummers. We have summer hummingbirds that come either to visit or they're on their way further north, like the ruby throat, and the ruby throat is the one that makes the awesome trans-Gulf migration. We also get black-chinned. And I think one of the cool things is they use spider webs to build their nests. But look, can you imagine? You weigh about 2.8 grams, so you can mail 10 of them for the price of a first-class stamp, and you're going to fly from the Yucatan to the Gulf Coast. It can take you 14, 20, 24 hours to do that. And then you have to restock, refuel, and head on up to Canada and the Northeast. I don't know about you, but that is amazing. I think it's amazing. So just a few comments. How can we take care of our birds? Something that you could really consider is planting natives, providing water, providing that shelter, understory, give them some nest sites, and we need to preserve habitat. So I don't know about you, but now's a good time to think about gardening for wildlife, not just in the spring, but putting plants out now, thinking about how the seasons change. Cornell Lab says that native plants produce about 7.5 times the number of insects that non-native plants do. There's an excellent book by Douglas Tallamy. You can get it out of the library, Bringing Nature Home, which will bring this point home about how important native plants are. So many of our songbirds feed their babies caterpillars. So it's not just butterfly caterpillars, it's moth caterpillars too. But we need to make sure that they have the foods they need when they need them. An average chickadee brood needs about 3,500 caterpillars. That's a lot of trips and a lot of caterpillars. Keep your feeders clean. We don't want to spread that trichomoniasis around that affects our mourning doves. think about cats and don't use pesticides. We do have hummers that stay in here in the winter, rufous, and sometimes the calliope. So if you know there's one in the neighborhood, you can actually continue to keep your feeders up. But if you're like me, it's not worth it. I'll just take them down from about October and put them back up again in March. But you want to make sure to change them out in hot weather at no more than 3 days, but really 2 days is better. Shallow water. Many of our birds need just shallow water. About 1 inch deep is good for them. Or if you can hang it in a tree if you've got that cat situation. They sometimes will come to little ant moats. So the center of this easy to clean hummingbird feeder has water in it to keep the ants out. And you'll see that you've got titmice, chickadees, Baltimore Orioles will even come. Now they're looking for the nectar, but still. What about this bird bath? Is this a good bird bath? It's really too deep. However, if you're going to be attracting red-tailed hawks to your yard, it's okay to have this type of bird bath. But if you have this antique bird bath from your mothers or grandmothers, you could actually put a rock, raise it up a little bit in the middle so you have a little bit of an island so the birds would have a shallow area. But you do want to keep them clean. Then, like Dale said, you want to have cavities. So any dead snags that aren't going to fall and hurt people, those are wonderful for our red-bellied woodpeckers, our screech owls, and then our little chickadees and titmice. You know, it would be really cool to have a chimney swift tower here at the First Unitarian Church. There's one over at the Austin Community Gardens. Nest boxes, you can hang them. Don't hang them from trees. It's really important to think like a predator, and they're going to say, ooh, tree, I can just climb that. Snakes, we might not think we have snakes. They're definitely an important part of the ecosystem. They can climb poles. So you need to put a baffle on it. Window strikes, the American Bird Conservancy estimates we kill 300 million to a billion birds per year by flying into windows. I bet it's happened to you. So again, you want to think like a bird. They're looking at that reflection and they think, I can fly through that. So there are certain things you can do. You can research this. Here's what one woman's solution here in town, and since she put this up in March, it's just nylon screening hanging from a dowel with little weights on the bottom. She's not had any bird strikes on these windows. So lots of things. I said I was hoping you'd take away one thing to think about. Cats kill millions of birds per year. Compared to sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawk, they are, like here, and here's the number that's killed by the predatory birds. Water makes a difference. You're probably aware of what's going on with the whooping crane habitat down at the coast, so if we can conserve water, that's really great. Anything we can do to quit reducing habitat is a good thing. Shade-grown coffee makes a difference to our birds when they go south for the winter. Restoring habitat, preserving habitat, all really are essential. And then Garden for Wildlife, if you're interested in learning more about the Habitat Stewards Program, just Google search Wildlife Austin, cityofaustin.gov, and you'll have more information. Now, some people are lucky enough to have this bird in their yard, painted bunting. If you're living out like west, you might see it. But if you're interested in learning more about our birds, this is Travis Audubon. Just want you to know we're out there, and you can take classes. We have monthly meetings, and we have 3 sanctuaries, one that's for the golden cheek, one that's on the east side where we're doing a lot of outreach with Norman Elementary, which is a Title I school. Those kids are just transformed by the experience. And we have free field trips every weekend and plus on 2-hour Tuesdays. So it's just something to think about. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Okay, please raise your hand if you have a question. I'll bring the mic around.
Hi. My question is, I have an owl that's near my bedroom window because I hear it at night. I would love to be able to see it. Would I scare it if I tried to, go outside with a flashlight? Would it go away? Or should I just leave it alone?
Probably just a one-time thing with your flashlight is not going to cause it to vacate the premises, but I wouldn't do it over and over. I mean, that is how people find owls. They get those big spotlights and they go out. And if it's overused in a certain area, it'll drive them away. But just a one-time thing, it's probably a great horned owl. So anyway, if you just there's a wonderful website all about birds. Just go to that. It's Cornell Lab's website. Type in great horned owl. They've got the little sound fragment. You can play it, and you should be able to ID it. The other one I'd look for is eastern screech owl, and the last one is barred, B-A-R-R-E-D. Not barred like Shakespeare, B-A-R-D, which I've seen people do. That's pretty funny. But anyway, those are your three choices.
I have several questions, but one that occurred to me when you started to talk about owls was that I had a problem with rats at my house over in Cherrywood, and so Kimvery came and put out these black traps that the rats would walk into and eat these pellets that desiccate.
Oh, yeah.
And then I saw something in National Geographic or Audubon about trying to pass laws to outlaw that. I had thought that it didn't have effect after the first animal ate it, but now I'm afraid that I've killed an owl or something through the time. So if you could speak to that.
Well, hopefully they weren't just eating your rats. They were eating other people's things that hadn't been treated. But yeah, it is a problem for owls and also things like red-tailed hawks. I mean, there's a real famous red tail up in New York City, pale male, and he's lost a lot of his wives who have eaten rats that were poisoned. So it does go up the food chain. And there is, I'm forgetting which poison that is, but I think it's even been outlawed in Europe, but we're still keeping it in the U.S., so it is a problem. Now, I'd have to look at bird biology. I think there's probably a certain load that they can handle. But what can you do? Change to traps, yeah. That would probably be better. Get a pet snake, but not a pet cat, not an outdoor cat. That's a problem. So I doubt that you single-handedly killed that owl, but it's a problem, and so we do have to think about pesticides. Yes?
Thank you so much for a fabulous presentation
Well,
today.
thank you.
I thought any moment you'd start making noises like the birds.
Well,
you're really good at
maybe
it.
I could, but...
You mentioned putting a couple things here at our church at First Unitarian that you thought would be appropriate for our setting. Was wondering if you could A, repeat what those were, and B, we're right next to the State School for the Deaf, for the blind. State School for the Blind, right? Isn't
Right,
it blind?
for the School for the Blind,
Yeah.
right.
And so your comment about Norman Elementary made me think there might be some connectivity between the young people that go to school there and us about birds.
Yeah, now
Thank you,
there are groups of blind birders who can identify everything by sound, which I'm pretty good at identifying by sound, but if you start young, man, you can get really good at that. The two types of habitats, artificial habitats, chimney swift tower, and we have the chimney swift tower experts here in Austin, Texas. We have the plans, there are a couple of books on it, and that one has the least maintenance. So that's kind of attractive when you're always stretched for volunteers. It doesn't take much to maintain a chimney swift tower every year. The other is going to demand more maintenance, and that is the purple martin gourds. Okay, there is a man in town who does a lot of installations, or you can do your own. I mean, Bark and Purr has purple martin houses, but to be really successful, you need to be monitoring those gourds every week, taking them down. Unfortunately, taking out the house sparrows, and because they will kill the purple martin babies and the adults. So it's a little bit more maintenance. Chimney swifts probably need our help a little bit more than purple martins do.
Cats. We have a bird feeder, a seed feeder in our backyard. We have some shrubs that the birds can hide in, but also the cats.
I know.
These are not our cats, these are neighborhood cats. Not feral, I think. They're
Right.
too well groomed. In the 3 or so years that we've had the feeder, I think one bird has been caught. One dead bird on the ground with lots of feathers scattered around. So we do have a baffle for the squirrels because they want to climb up to the feeder. But I'm really wondering whether we need to be very serious about the birds. I mean, birds in the wild have natural predators.
cats kill millions and millions of birds. There is a wonderful study ongoing right now between National Geographic and University of Georgia, and it's called the Kitty Cam, K-I-T-T-Y, CAM, C-A-M project, so you can Google search it. And they are finding that the cats only bring home 1/4 of what they kill, you know. And the fact that you saw a whole bunch of feathers thrown about makes me almost wonder what it was that killed it. But I assure you that there are many, many, many more cats than there are sharp-shinned hawks or Cooper's hawk. Oh, so what can you do in your own yard? I have the same problem that you do. It's neighbors' cats. And you can get that little low fencing, it's about 3 feet tall, from Home Depot, and it's not the most attractive thing, but you can put that in front of your shrubs, so if the cats are behind or in the shrubbery, at least if they have to jump over 3 feet, those birds are so sensitive to movement, the slightest movement, and they're gone. Now, so that's one thing that I'm trying, and I'm having some success with that. Or you could try to move your feeder, or you could decide, I'm not going to feed, which is too bad, but get a pet coyote, that's not going to work. So, but anyway, trying that little bit of fencing to kind of slow those cats down is what I would suggest. Or think about maybe just feeding your goldfinches and your hummingbirds and not putting out the sunflower seed, because it's those ground feeders, it's your doves and your cardinals that are the most susceptible to getting killed.
So whenever I look at field guides,
Yes.
I often see East Texas, West Texas, and Austin right in the middle. Do you have a recommendation in general for Eastern U.S., Western U.S. guides?
Because we are on that line between East and West, you do not want the Eastern, because you'll get those birds that are Western birds if you're on the West. So really, you should get one like the National Geographic, which I mentioned, or the Sibley.
For the whole country?
Yeah.
Okay.
Really, those are the ones to have. These East-West, it's nice to carry around in the field when you're going on a bird field trip, but it is so exasperating because half the time you're looking for the one that isn't in there.
And then you said sharp-shinned Cooper's hawks?
Yes.
I often hear people just kind of randomly identifying every hawk as a red-tailed, and I think that they don't. I'll include myself. If I don't know better, I just say red-tailed. Are there red-tailed hawks? Are they easy to tell apart?
So if you're looking on MOPAC now, the red-tailed hawks, we do have year-round populations, but the red-taileds that come from up north, there are many, like they space themselves on MOPAC and on I-35. You'll see them on the light poles. And so, yes, they're back for the winter. Unfortunately, they get killed by cars. They have binocular vision. They zone in on that little mouse down there in the grassy median, and they go down, and when they're flying back up, I've seen them get hit before. So there are rehab people who help them if they're not totally squashed. But red-tail is the default big hawk. If it's big, and not all of them have red tails. That's key, too. Yeah, the immatures don't.
Okay, we're going to try to squeeze one more question. We have about a minute.
And I'm happy to stay afterwards, too.
You said black oil sunflower seed.
Black oil sunflower seed.
How long does it stay good?
Well, mine gets eaten pretty fast, so I don't really have a problem. I would keep your seed in a controlled, I wouldn't put it out in 90-degree heat. I would keep it in air conditioning. You should be going through it like HEB has 10-pound bags. It probably won't last you more than 3 or 4 weeks. But if you keep it around for a while, you will get those little moths that hatch out like people have when they keep pet birds. So, that's not bad. It should still be okay because they like the larva. I would say, probably no more than like 3 months. Yeah, but I don't think you're going to have that problem.
Well, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for a really great
Thank you.
presentation.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.